This program has always been put together really to help you build resilience, to be able to navigate the road ahead. I mean, stuff happens in people's lives. It's how do you deal with the stuff? Because how you deal with the stuff is really determines who you are, or indicates to the world who you are. When you squeeze, what comes out? So really, this program is put together to actually help you navigate the road ahead and get to where it is that you want to be going, and without losing your integrity and your passion for life. Let me start with a question. I mean, what's at the core of all change, of all progress, of all achievement? If you want to achieve high levels of success, high levels of performance, and you think about people in the past that have been able to achieve those levels of success and performance, what did they have? What did all these people have in common? I'm trying to work out, who are these faces, all right? How many can get? Probably 80% of the faces. So what do all these people have in common? What is at the core of change, of progress, of achievement, high levels of success and performance? What have these guys been able to do? Maybe in the sporting arena, maybe in the advancement of science, maybe in the advancement of humanity, maybe in the advancement of spirituality, maybe the advancement of us as consciousness, technology, right? I mean, one of the greatest minds at the bottom left-hand corner, Stephen Hawkins, one of the greatest minds that we've had on the planet on the advancement of the understanding of the mind and physics and quantum physics and technology. So what do these guys have in common? I mean, that's something to think about. The next question is, what's the most critical habit to break through in life, not only for you to break in life, to help other people break through in life? What do you think the most critical habit is? Sure, clarity is important. Sure, energy is important. Sure, courage is important. Productivity is important. But if you want to move the needle to make change in the world, to break through and to help others break through, you need to have this. What's another word for influence, guys? What do you think influence is? What's Mary saying? Impact? Yeah, great point. Why do they have impact? That's right, impact. Influence is impact. Impact, the power to influence. Well, the power of influence is actually impact. But what did they have to be able to create the impact, guys? What gave them that power to have the influence? I feel like breaking it in flow. Yeah, they were in flow, but what were they able to do? They were in flow, and when they're in flow and they were impact, they were able to inspire. Yeah, awesome, actually. So I had to put people in a state of connecting to the spirit. How did they inspire? Leadership. And what do you need to have great leadership? A connection. These are all great questions. Communicate. Communication skills, people skills. Influence at the core of influence is people skills, guys. We don't do life on our own. We do it with other people. All these things you put there are important. You need to be able to lead, to inspire, to be in integrity, to be able to communicate, to have a connection. I think these are all core values of someone who has influence, right? These are all core values of someone that has the ability to create impact. Now, it's interesting because you might think of influence, big picture. We go back and look at these pictures, look at these people, and think, oh my God, I can't be like them. I don't have that influence. But every day, I'm here to tell you have influence. Who do you influence every day? Your kids, your colleagues at work, your friends, your siblings. Every time you have a conversation, you're telling someone your point of view, guess what? You're exercising your powers of influence. And I'm not saying powers if it's a wonder power. Well, it is a superpower. Our ability to communicate is your superpower. Your ability to connect with other people is your superpower. And to connect with other people, you need to understand people. You need to understand behavior. You need to understand why people do what they do. You probably need to take a backward step or a bird's eye view. And when someone acts out and says something to you, maybe ask yourself a different question. What must this person be going through for them to be acting this way? What is it that they're thinking that's led them to this action? And what may be happening in their life for them to be doing this? Because they'll give you a whole different spin in terms of how you then react. Would you agree? before we jump to concussions or conclusions, as they say? So influence, having people skills, the ability to communicate. I think you need all those values. I think you need all those characteristics. So is it something that's you're born with? Or is it something that's bestowed on you? I think leadership is bestowed on you, but you need to develop your influence skills. You need to develop your communication skills. You need to, bridge. There's a gap, guys. Stuff happens in a life, right? It's how we deal with the stuff, right? So there's no problems in a life, only circumstances. So think over here, we have circumstances that occur. So how do we deal with those circumstances? We need to ask ourselves the questions. There's a gap. If we find ourselves reacting in a way which is inappropriate, do we have the knowledge? Did this circumstance bring up a knowledge gap? So now we have an awareness that we've got a gap of knowledge that we need to address. Well, if you're finding out you're always jumping to conclusions with people and you're reactive with them, well, maybe you haven't learned how to communicate. Maybe you haven't learned how to listen. Do you think there's a knowledge gap? But, when people jump on their high horse and say, no, it's not me, they know it all, guess what? Maybe they're not taking responsibility. I really love this. It's the KRC triangle. And it was introduced to us when I was doing the mastery coaching with Tony Robbins. And it was a chiropractor in the States, in Dallas. Wayne Sterren, his name was, and I'll acknowledge him because that's where I got the concept from. And we just evolve it. And he said, well, there's the KRC. Have you learned the KRC? Knowledge, responsibility, circumstances. Because circumstances affect our life based on the meaning we give these circumstances, correct? There's no meaning in life other than the meaning that we give it. So if you realize there's a gap, are you open to learn something new? Or do you point the finger, it's not me? Because if you point the finger, you're keeping away from the circumstance. You're calling it a problem. And we know in order to deal with this circumstance, you need to confront the circumstance. And that you don't confront controls you. You don't confront these circumstances, they become a problem. They control you. Who decides to confront it? You do. You run away from it. It's your ego. It's the blind spots, the scotomas that we live in that stop us from confronting circumstances, guys. So you think about the identity you need to have, or who are you, in order to, acknowledge, hey, there's a gap. Let me take responsibility to learn this, to confront the circumstance. I've just become aware, that's knowledge. It's my stuff, or there's a gap in knowledge. Let me confront it by learning something new. And when I learn something new, I'll come back and realize now I've got a new set of knowledge in order to understand what may be happening in my life. So does a problem exist? There's no such thing as a problem. It's just data. So data is a circumstance. KRC triangle, confront the circumstance. Do you think these people confronted the circumstances, guys? In my opinion, they created what they created, and they led, and they're able to create change in the world because they confronted the circumstances in their life. They took on the responsibility. They said, hey, there's a gap of knowledge here. I need to learn something new. Is that the behavior you're exercising? Or you're falling into, I don't want to say the commoners, but a behavior which most people say is common. So the ability to break through, you think about it, it's influence. So as we said, influence is the number one, a main skill, a habit that you need to develop, and you can learn it and you can enhance it through putting yourself in a situation to move the needle in that area. So what this session is going to be, our goal in this session is to understand what influence really means, what it means for you, and have a discussion around it. Ask you some questions, get you to think about it a little bit differently. I mean, what if you thought about it? What would be a better way to think about it? That's an interesting question. If we thought of it this way, what would happen if, there's certain language that we can use to maybe get people looking at things differently, so we can influence people with our language. So let's have a look at what is influence. If we're going to be talking about what is the definition of influence, and interesting because we use this a lot in, I suppose, our brand. We talk about the rise of the integrated influencer. What is an integrated influencer? Because a lot of people use the word influence, I think, in today's world, or the influencer, not really at the essence of what this means. Today, the word influencer is used in the digital space. Who's on Clubhouse at the moment? Anyone on Clubhouse? If you're not on Clubhouse, you got to get on Clubhouse, mate. I've become a Clubhouse addict. You need to have an iPhone to get on Clubhouse. A lot of good talks and people. And yeah, you get on Clubhouse and everyone's just calling themselves an influencer. And it's all these influencers going to get, and an influencer, someone's got all these likes that create some sort of impact digitally. But you know how they measure influence in the digital space is the amount of likes that you have, or the amount of followers that you have. Well, here's a question. I'm sure you know a lot of people that have lots of followers but don't have any impact. And you probably know other people that got few followers that have more impact. Would you agree with that? So is influence really the amount of likes that you have or many followers that you have? Or this, the capacity to have an effect on the character, the development or behavior of someone or something, or the effect itself? So if you've got the capacity to do that, well, what is your capacity to do? That's a good question. If you're to rate yourself, where are you? Maybe 0 to 10, you can give us with the kids, you might be a 10. Or maybe when they're 6 or 7 or 8, when they become 16, it changes. Is that right, Megan? So what is influence for you is the question. Because where in your life do you have an influential role that maybe you're not aware of? And at different stages in our life, and when we have kids, you need to influence them differently when they're toddlers, to influence them differently when they're teenagers, to influencing them differently when they're young adults. Wouldn't you agree? So at different stages in someone's life, you influence them differently. And you're at a different stage in life, you provide a different level of influence. Like you could be a young entrepreneur providing influence with your experience and knowledge, and then you can be a grandpa providing influence with your knowledge, the grandpa coach. Yeah, for me, I'm talking about Michael here because we're doing some intensive, some immersion learning by doing all this social media stuff with some of the guys that are doing close work with us. And he's rebranded himself as the grandpa coach. How good is that, hey? And he feels congruent with it, be able to give people an opportunity to connect to some sort of wisdom of a grandpa that they might not have access to. So he has the capacity to have the effect on the character and behavior of someone. Certainly people that seek that out. If people don't seek it out, they don't seek it out. But when you seek something out, you're looking for someone to be able to influence you or help you with making a decision or advise you on how to move forward. And really, that's what influence does. It keeps you moving forward, guys. When you think about influence, influence is actually the core of growth. Without any influences, do you move forward? Can anything grow without influence? Because you need to exercise influence for something to happen. Like maybe influence is that kinetic energy for a spark to be created. The influence of two sticks rubbing together, that kinetic energy, that is the kinetic or potential energy that creates the fire, perhaps. So let me ask you some questions. Where's your influence? So if we're not influential, what are we doing? We're just following. So I'm going to ask you the question, are you a follower or a leader? It's a good question to ask ourselves, right? So how influential have you been as we think about the last month or last 2 months, guys? And maybe in some areas we have. So what is it that we're doing in those areas that we're not doing in the other areas? That's interesting. Who wants to play? I want you to rate 2 areas. What is the area that you're most influential in? Write that in a number, and the area that you're least influential in, write that in a number. And I mean, I suppose you're just looking at your whole areas of life. However you look at it, I'm not giving you any variables. Use the variables that make sense to you. So which area are you most influential in? Is it family? Is it your health? Is it relationships? Is it work? I don't know. And which area are you least influential in? There's no right or wrong answer. This is just your self-reflection, right? And when we do these numbers, well, let's clarify. When you look at other people's numbers, it's got nothing to do with you, right? If you're looking at someone else's number, you're making it mean something, right? Because someone else's 7 could be your 3, and your 8 could be someone else's 2. We don't know. So the only person you compete with is the person you were yesterday. Right. So let me ask you this question then. What is it that you're doing in the area that has the high influence that you're not doing in the low influence area? As you think of that score, why are you that number? We've asked that question. And what would you should be doing to move that number up a few notches? Well, yeah, ask yourself the question. What do you think you need to do that you know you need to do in the low area to move it up? What do you need to do? Just write it down. So think about your lower area. So what do you need to do? Ultimately, guys, it comes down to this. And I think this one slide that we keep on showing, every habit we talk about, everything that we do in our life really comes down to the logical level of your consciousness and what you need to do within yourself to change. Where are you at with influence? Because however you express it is a reflection of what? Your identity, correct? So do you have influence in your career? Do you have influence with your family? Do you have influence in your relationships? Do you have influence in your personal growth, in your health and fitness and spirituality? What logical level do you need to work on to change your influence? Am I making sense? Because influence, if you want better results with the influence, you need to change something. What do you need to change? You need to change your behavior. So ask yourself, what behavior has to change? What would you need to change? Write that down. Because once you've written down the behavior that we need to change, guess what you need to ask next? Okay, so what skills and capabilities need to change in order for me to change that behavior? Where's the gap? Do you have the skills? Do you have the capability? Do you need to learn something? Do we just identify a gap? So what skills and capabilities would you need to acquire in order for you to be able to do the behavior that you know right now to get the results of an influential person? Well, this diagram, guys, is really your breakthrough diagram. Because whichever area you're working with, what's the logical level of change that needs to take place within your unconscious mind in order for you to get the results that you want in that area? The results is the environment as an influencer in your spirituality, your relationships, your family, your career. What's the behavior that would need to change? What's the skills? Ask yourself the question, what beliefs would need to change? What stories would need to change about yourself in order for you to have those skills, to have the different behaviors, to be getting different results as an influencer? See, it's great talking about this from a different context, but coaching and helping someone break through, there's some basic models, standard templates that we use from different contexts that create the change. And this is at the heart of NLP. Can you see how you can use this diagram, guys? Because ultimately then the question is, what's the identity that you would need to, who would you be if you were that influencer, that now, if you were influential, if you got to 7 with your family, if you got to 8 or 9, if you just moved the needle just by one more point, who would you need to be? What's the identity of that person? What are their characteristics? Are they committed or are they just interested? Who do you want to work with? Someone that's just interested or someone that's committed? Good question. Are you committed or interested? And then, of course, how do you connect to your source? Because that's where your identity comes from. So again, this one question, this question which we got from Jim Fortin, we're talking about influence now. Here's the question. Who would I be? What would I do? And how would I feel if I already had influence to the level that you wanted it, right? Or if I already had more influence? Because what's everyone want in life? They want more of something, whatever the more is for them, more happiness, more fulfillment, more success. If you ever met anyone saying, I'm fulfilled, I'm in the present moment, so you got everything you want right now. Yeah. Could life be any better? Well, it could. So then you want more. Even the Dalai Lama wants more depth in his meditation practice, wouldn't you think? So that's my preamble on influence. So now let's get into, see, all that other stuff is my extra stuff, right? Now we're getting into the predetermined coaching session. So you can see the difference. So this is how we've set it up for you. So let's have a high performance discussion on influence. What are some questions that we want to ask? Get you thinking about them. Okay. So what does influence mean for you? We've talked about that. And of course, you can share it individually with everyone when you get into the breakout room. Does anyone want to share anything that maybe we haven't talked about? Maybe put a different set of eyes on it from me. Different spin on the influence. Anyone else want to share anything? Just open up the microphone.
Can I just say, being in the beauty industry, I personally have a negative connotation to that word because influencer in Instagram or social media are known to be people that are going to sell you something. So when I look at the images you put in the beginning, of course, they're spiritual leaders, and I almost don't take them as influencers because that's the connotation. So I don't know if anyone else feels that way, or is it just, I don't know, something that's happening in this generation that, like you said, if you have more likes, more followers, you must be an influencer. So it has a little negative twist to it. A little.
I agree with you, and that's where we're at in terms of we want to be able to work with this, right? This is the definition of influence, not the digital space. The digital space has hijacked the word influencer because just because I've got these likes, I've got the potential to, they have the potential to do this because I've got more followers. I've got the potential to maybe sell a product more or get a bigger impact, get a message out to people. The potential's there, but having a like doesn't mean people follow you. You can have followers because you create a polarized identity.
Just earlier, I watched Celeste Barber. If you guys know her, she's becoming this really funny, very well known. And guess what? She was selling a product and she did it in a very funny way, but obviously they're using her to influence others. So to sell this particular makeup product or makeup range. But I mean, obviously she's created a following and she's got a really good cause and a natural way behind it. So that's different, right?
Yeah, and I suppose you think about the marketing field, right? The marketing agencies and organizations are going to find which person has got the potential to influence the market more to be able to move our product, right? And so what's attached to the influence is this. When you think about having an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone or something, what's the behavior? The buying behavior. So essentially, at the core of a digital influencer is a definition of this. But people tend to use the word influencer just in the digital space today. Whereas Mother Teresa was an influencer, but how many Instagram followers does she have? Right? Gandhi was a huge influencer, but many Facebook followers did he have? All right. So that's the thing. So I think, and this is really, I suppose, is it our challenge? Let's rise up to it as a group. So we got the opportunity to actually educate people what real influence is. And I suppose this is why when you think about the brand that we've created, the integrated influence, what's an integrated influence? And that rises through the levels of consciousness, values level 4, 5, 6, 7, to be able to have an impact on the world from a bird's eye view without being caught up in that values level 3, that ego guru stuff, or values level 4 being the therapist, follow the system, or 5 being the coach, but I want to be the best and make money, but no one as good as me, but I don't want other people to lose. And then 6, I just want to be the healer and heal the world, right? But 7, the integrated practitioner. And, what is a practitioner? Someone that practices a way of life. And I thought about this morning, because when I created interesting, because the group that we've changed to evolve from the inside out was the original group, the Rise of the Integrated Influencer. And before it was the Rise of the Integrated Influencer, I called it the Rise of the Integrated Practitioner, because my mission was to, in the space of the wellness industry, to change the wellness industry, change the mentality and thinking of health professionals, wellness professionals, people in the field that are helping people to move from the old mentality of therapy or even coaching and a session by session to a more integrated way of working with someone, change the consciousness. And it's interesting, I've gone through circles to come back to that as a niche market, because that is a passion of mine. I want to make a difference in this space of, how many wellness practitioners out there, because like me, how many of us have jumped into this field because we wanted to make a difference because of our journey, right? We had a healing. We went to see someone and we were blown away with what they did. We were blown away with the experience that we had, and we want to be able to learn these things and give back. But we get caught up on this hamster wheel of how we're supposed to do things as a therapist or then a coach or a healer, and we use those words. But do we practice it as a way of life? I think that's what a practitioner is. A practicos, it's your hands. It's a way of life. And you can only do that if you integrate it. You deal with the emotions of the guru, the doctor in the white coat, values level 3, the therapist, values level 4, the coach, values level 5, the healer, values level 6, to become the integrated practitioner. And so I realized, I'm getting excited now, I'm going to talk fast. What I realized is, how things have been evolving, we're creating a full suite, because we want to help individuals to evolve as an integrated influencer, whatever you choose to be. A parent, you're an integrated influencer, right? Whatever you choose to be, and that's the evolve from the inside out. It only happens from doing the work from the inside out for you to evolve, to be able to influence people from an authentic space. And along the way, if you find that you've got a calling, that you want to come in this field, then we're going to help you become an integrated practitioner. So we're going to have evolve from the inside out, which is for the public, for everyone to become an influencer, and then bring back and create another group, the Rise of the Integrated Practitioner, which is basically the evolve business, people who want to become a coach and help them from that perspective. But anyway, that's where I feel, and if you think about it too, because the areas that here's where the areas you have influence, guys. You know where you have influence? When you can speak to people from a knowing rather than a knowledge. Because when you speak from knowing, you speak from authenticity. There's so many people out there today, and on the space, the educational space, the how-to space, how-to videos, how to do this, how to get to 6 figures in your business, how to become enlightened. People can do a program yesterday, learn some awesome stuff, and share it tomorrow in a how-to coaching session. But the teaching from knowledge. How-to from knowledge as opposed to how-to from knowing. And I think you know the difference when you're speaking to someone from a knowing. Would you agree, guys? So how-to from the knowledge perspective, or how-to from the knowing perspective. So does that make sense, guys, when I'm saying, when you think about how-to from a knowledge? If you want real influence, influence comes from being authentic. I was listening to a podcast this morning again. If you ever follow them, Brendan LeCuria and James Wedmore, it's the Mind Your Business podcast, and Brendan LeCuria has got a business which is about how do you get your message out in the most authentic way, how you do it with video. Sure, it's a business focus, but still it's an individual person. How do you share your message? And the language of your message is so important to get people engaged, to be able to influence them down a path of change. And the first step is vulnerability. In order for you to be influential, you need to allow yourself to be vulnerable. We'll talk about this later on when we get into the tips, but for you to be influential, you need to be what's the word I'm looking for? You need to demystify belief systems. You need to demystify myths. You need to rock the status quo. You need to unshackle paradigms that people are connected to. Because if you can help someone create a paradigm shift in here and a paradigm feeling shift in here, they change, they move. And that happens from you speaking from a space of knowing as a space of just textbook, which is great, but you haven't got that experience. And so that vulnerability of you coming from a space of having done that.